Hello out there, everyone. Today we're going to take a quick look at 1981's Nighthawks, a film starring Sylvester Stallone, Billy D. Williams, and the first, uh, the debut, I suppose, of Rutger Hauer in the Hollywood format. This was his first Western film, and he was just simply terrific in it. I would argue that Rutger Hauer, pretty much in anything, is going to be watchable when he's on screen, but I thought he really made a potent debut with this film. And it's interesting, after having read up on it and watched the supplements, it appears that there was some conflict behind the scenes about the focus of the character. Originally, I think there was going to be more emphasis put on the Rutger Hauer international terrorist character, and I believe Sly really pushed back and wanted to make it more told through the lens of his character, which it's not to say Sly was bad in this, because I think actually this is one of his better films. I would say his performance is good and believable, and I think the plot is particularly good. I think what's also interesting about this is that at one point this story was to be the French Connection 3, but when Gene Hackman opted out of it, this script became something else, and that something else is Nighthawks. But it definitely started off as something of repute, and I think a pretty good story that was just tweaked to make it more about these two cops played by Billy D. Williams and Sylvester Stallone, and this international terrorist played by Rutger Hauer. And I want to firstly point out too that the cinematography on this looks really good. There's a couple of really impressive set action pieces. There's one sequence that takes place on foot through a New York City subway, including a part of the subway system that was apparently under construction, and it is remarkable. Then there's another action set piece up on the Roosevelt Island, Skyway or whatever, that little tram that runs across the East River and onto Roosevelt Island rather, and onto Manhattan. That is particularly good as well. And then there's a final action sequence that includes a bus jumping into the East River, and apparently the stunt people that were driving the bus had some difficulty getting back up to the surface, despite the fact that they had, air tanks and the like. From what the cinematographer or the director, I can't recall which, said in the supplemental features, the stunt crew didn't account for how basically the current in the East River was more turbulent than they had anticipated, and so when the bus was submerged, it was sort of flipping over end over end, and apparently the stuntmen who were inside had a difficult time figuring out which end was up. But thankfully no one was killed, but apparently there was some drama there as it was unfolding, and it could have been a pretty tragic accident on set. But I digress. I think what's really interesting about this film, and the reason it holds up so well, is obviously the subject matter. I think it was a little ahead of its time when it came out. They were clearly sort of riffing off of Carlos the Jackal, but I think what's really just interesting, watching it now in 2023, is how prescient the story was, and how Rutger Hauer in particular played such a convincing and menacing baddie in the movie. I mean, there is no denying the magnetism and the charisma of Rutger Hauer in his performance. He just did an incredible job. So I think on balance, this is arguably one of Sly's best films. I would put it alongside Rocky 1 and 2, and perhaps Copland as being, some of his best work. And I think the reason to really trumpet the film is predominantly because of the action sequences, which are quite good, all in camera, all practical, and also Rutger Hauer's just basically he lit up the screen, and you could see why he would go on to later star in Blade Runner, The Hitcher, among others. He really did have a remarkable screen presence. So this Shout Factory Blu-ray is the PQ and AQ are good. I wouldn't necessarily write anything, write home about it. I would just say it's solid. The grain is sort of, it fluctuates. I think there are some instances where, especially the up close shots look really good and look very detailed, but then there are other moments where the image looks really grainy and not great. But I think, this is clearly the best the film has probably looked since it was released. And I think the other thing to remark is I think the supplemental features are all interesting, especially the backstory of the film and the sort of struggles they went through to keep everyone happy. Apparently it was not a terribly happy production because of the tug of war going on between Sylvester Stallone and the original director, who was fired, and then the new director, who I believe Stallone really kind of badgered into submission. But all interesting, and the only caveat, the only knock I would give the supplements is that they run the score in the background while the people are talking, and it's just obnoxious because I think the score is not terribly good. It's obviously indicative of its time, and on that front I'm fine with it, but it's just not a very appealing sonorific score. It's really kind of grates on my nerves after a while, to be honest. But one wonders if they couldn't possibly rescore this film, how much better it could be. But in any case, I digress. Definitely seek this film out. I think you will be shocked. Another one that was released around that time was Victory. Sylvester Stallone, I believe, played a prisoner who got on a soccer team against the guards, kind of like The Longest Yard, but with soccer. But and that's a good film as well. I believe that starred Pele and I want to say Michael Caine. But he's definitely good. Sylvester Stallone doesn't get enough credit, I think, as far as an actor goes. First Blood is another one that I think he's quite good in. But at the same time, his ego and his unwillingness to sort of let others shine around him is telling. And I think, especially later in his career, it doesn't really seem like he's grown at all in that regard. He still seems to have quite an ego on him. But there's no denying he's got a pretty decent handful of films that I certainly go back to on a regular basis. So on that note, do take care out there, everyone. Stay safe, be kind, and by all means, keep watching good cinema.